Good morning. Thank you for that introduction. Hope I can live up to it. Probably won't. Yeah, we travel all over. If you don't know me, our ministry is called Living Vine Ministries. We oversee several churches, not only in the States, but we oversee ministries over in Africa, different places across the country. Matter of fact, I'm going there in about 2 weeks, next week. And I'll be in Africa for almost 3 weeks this time. We're building a big building there outside of Durban in a place called Phoenix. We're trying to help I call them my family. We've been having this huge vision of trying to get kids off the street, but get them off the street and train them trade. And as they're learning a trade, we'll also have connections with businesses, and by the time they've graduated, they'll have a job. And and most of the kids, thank you. Most of the kids there just don't have enough money to even go to school. It's just this area that we're building in. It's probably one of the worst areas there in South Africa, outside of Durban. But that's where I like to go. I like to go where it's dark, where you can almost get killed, and because that's where God shows up. He has to protect you. When God sends you to places, most of them, I don't know about you, but most of the places that God sends me is either places I don't want to go or places that are very dark. It's just the way He works with me, because He knows I'm stubborn and redneck. But I do have a heart and a love for people. I used to not have that much of a love. God really turned me around years ago. I've been in the ministry over 20 years now, and He really turned my life around from being a bitter young man to really loving Jesus with all of his heart, with all of my heart. And I found myself, the more I loved Jesus, the more I loved people. And I've realized that if I didn't love Jesus and spend time with Him, I'd find myself getting irritated with people. Y'all ever done that? Y'all ever just been so irritated with people you just say to yourself under your breath, man, I better get with God or I'm going to kill somebody. Because that's just the way it is. When you're hanging out with the Lord and you spend time with Him, you listen to His words, feel His presence, and spend time with Him, then you find yourself loving the people that you normally wouldn't love, and you have more strength to have patience to bear with them, to long suffer with them, because that's what love does. It long suffers with people. And the reason you can long suffer is because you love them. If you try to long suffer because God said so, oh man, you're going to be mad and you're going to hurt somebody. You got to get it in your system. You got to get love in your system where it becomes your DNA. Then you can truly long suffer with someone because you really love them. There's a total different aspect there. One of the main things that the Lord's been really telling me is that we've got to get in His presence again. We got to spend time with Him. I spoke on that Friday. I even shared a little bit, I think at breakfast, touched a little bit more on that. And it's deep right now. And the other aspect and what we really need as a church and as a people, I'm not talking about just the church in general. I consider church when I look at people. I see, when I look at people that don't even know the Lord, I just look at it and that's a church that's walking away from God. That's one of my brothers, that's one of my sisters. And so I will treat them the same way, as I would anybody else. If I think that those people are different or I think highly of myself more than them, then I'll find myself loving them in a twisted way. And I'll find myself loving them because I'm really judging them inside, so I want them to change, so I'll fake loving them for a while until they change, and then we'll come together. Okay, breathe. That was a big one. I don't want to do that. I tried that. do the smiles and the try to love them until they change. And man, it made me more miserable than them. Because it didn't work. And I used to think because they weren't changing, it was their fault. And finally I said, Lord, why aren't they changing? I'm trying to love them and get them into the kingdom. He goes, well, that's not the way you do it. They see that you don't really love them. You're loving them just because you've been commanded to from things that you've been taught in the past. Why don't you get my love for them and see them as a true person? And if you can love them at face value, then you will see no flaws, and then you can help them. You'll see them as just a normal person that you've fallen in love with. And then he said, I can start moving and changing them. But we got to get you changed first. I said, how can you do that? He said, well, you got to let me in this area of judgment in your heart. Well, that took about 2 years. I didn't realize how much I performed to get people changed. I didn't really love. But when the love started taking over, I started even seeing the Bible differently. I started seeing Jesus differently. I saw that Jesus didn't come just because he had to, he wanted to. He didn't minister to people because he wanted to create ministry. He wanted to create life. He wanted to give people life. He didn't have to shift into a mode so that people could change. He was the mode. He was love. And when he spoke to somebody, he would speak to them as though he really cared. And that's what just blow their minds, because back in those days there was so much hypocriticalness and things that were going on. You couldn't even speak right, or the priest would, analyze you, or, there would be people creeping around to see if you're really walking the right walk, and if you were bringing to the temple your sacrifice. And there was tax collectors that were crooked, and everybody was hard. And here comes a man that actually takes time to look at you and just really love you where you are. If he didn't say anything to you, just to look in his eyes, you'd know that man cared. How many of you guys have been in a ditch before in your life? And you get people that would come by the ditch and go, well, you made your bed, and how did that feel? How did that feel? Hard, didn't it? It was awful. And it made you even harder. It made you madder, so the ditch gets even deeper. Because it made your nature just mean. And then you get people that comes by and smiles and says, I'll be praying for you. Then you get madder. Oh, come on. And then you find this guy comes along, has a lot of things to do, but that's not that important. What he does is not that important. It's who he's with. And so he just stops, kneels down, and says, I'd like to help you. Do you mind if I help you? Can I lift you out? You don't deserve to be in this ditch. Well, I dug it. Okay. Do you want out? Well, yeah. Well, come on. I'll help you out. And he pulls you out, and he doesn't want anything from you. He's not even asking you to change. What he's doing is changing you. That's the sound of the Good Samaritan. They had years of Levites that would walk by troubled people. They had years of priests that would walk by with their priestly garment. Had a gig to go to, though. And man got rejected. Those are eras of rejection. But then this man comes along and spends his own money, pulls a person out, spends his own money, pays the price, and if you can't pay it to get even healed more, he'll come back and pay more. Not because he has to, not because that's the call of God. He's doing it because he actually really cares for that person. And that blew people's minds. It was revolutionary. Totally revolutionary. We're coming into the same era. We're getting to the place to where there's no face-to-face encounters anymore. There's no time to spend with one another. If you find your life too busy to not spend time building relationship, you can gauge that that's the way your life is with God. And the enemy's got us so busy listening to all the things of this world, and it's pushing our spirits that we just don't have time for people in ditches. The Levite walks by, man, I've got a worship set I've got to do. I got prayer time. I don't have time for that. Me and God are one. I got to go lead some worship. You got a priest that walks by and I just don't have time. I've got so many duties that I've got to take care of. Sorry, man. I'll send you to the prophetic teams. Man needs relationship in order to survive. The enemy knows it. Businessmen are walking by and saying, I just don't have time for my family. I've got to make a living. And the sweat of man's brow is so bad these days, it's causing suicide. Because it leaves you empty. It leaves you by yourself. If you think about yourself, you will, at the end of your life, you will geographically be by yourself. You will have no friends. You will have nobody to be at your funeral because you're always thinking of yourself. And in the spirit, that sets you into a place of darkness where you're surrounded by nothing but darkness and you're by yourself. And at the end of the life, it has to geographically and physically actually appear. And the enemy is having a heyday. And he's pushing us into busyness. He's pushing us into where we just don't have time for relationship. So relationship now has been replaced by networks and, Twitters and Snapchat and Facebook and all that. And I love Facebook, believe it or not. I've had more people get saved on Facebook in our ministry than I've ever seen. But I've also had to guard against it. Being a friend now is being able to text each other, right? Send some emojis. But you never have time to really get with each other face to face. Isn't it strange? You don't even have to leave the house to go grocery shopping anymore. You don't. They can bring it to your house and make you stay isolated. That's not man's fault. The enemy's just slightly, it's convenient. Relationship's not. It's just not. Relationship makes you have to die. It makes you have to care. And if you care, your carnal mind can't stand it. Because just caring is a part of God. But these days, if you think about, well, so-and-so wants to come over, sometimes we just go, oh, man, I've had such a rough day. Do we have to have company? And you hadn't had company in 6 months. We call having, y'all okay? We call having relationship is just seeing a bunch of people, not cultivating intimacy. True, isn't it? I was with the Lord, man. When? Man, I went to this huge conference. Man, the Lord showed up. Ooh, oh. No, you wouldn't. Because you hadn't changed. If you cultivate relationship, you have to change. There's a challenge that goes on in your spirit. You have to actually be thinking of good things in order to build relationship instead of bad things. And so you find yourself having to die to your old self in order to allow God to renew you and to be a good person. But I can text something, well, praise the Lord, we're so proud of you, and on the other end, I'm just cussing. Oh, come on. But you can't get away with yourself if you're face to face. Am I right? Man, He wants us to know Him. Man, He wants us to hear Him again. God wants us to hear Him. He wants us to listen to Him. If we could start listening to Him instead of the barrage of information, I'm surprised these days. It seems like everybody's hearing God. But they ain't. That's country. I wrote it in the dictionary, ain't. It's amazing. They're hearing information. But when you hear God, it changes you. The ones that hear God, truly hear God, their character is challenged and they have to be transformed into that image. They have to obey what He's truly saying, and their character changes, and they become the nature of love on the earth. And you'll find these leaders actually walking by those that have a ditch to take time to get somebody out of the ditch while everybody's having all this pressure for them to say something and let's have a glorious service. They're sensitive to man because God is. They start becoming like the Lord, and He is sensitive to man's needs when He's in that place. They love God with all their heart, with all their soul, with all their strength and mind, and that the same way that they're doing it in their secret place in the manifest presence of God, they come out of it and they do the exact same thing with people. That's the way Jesus was. If you followed Him and He walked you out into the desert to spend time with you and you watched Him pray and you watched how He cared for you even in secret and the love that He had for you, and then you come out of the desert and you follow Him and you're walking through the crowds and somebody tugs on his cloak, He stops and says, oh, who was that, guys? And we're like, well, somebody touched me. We got to find that person. He's just as loving in secret and loving loving out here as much as the love that he has out here is the same that he has for me in the secret place. I used to love the secret place, but I didn't have the balance of doing it here. Oh, come on. Are you with me? Sometimes I'd say, well, their relationship is up to God. He goes, well, who are you? You're supposed to be a high priest. You're supposed to be like me on the earth. Aren't you supposed to be reflecting me on the earth? If they want to get in relationship with you, then they'd get in relationship with me. But if you don't show them love, they won't see me. Men will believe in me by the way you care and love for them, not by the way you preach to them. And I was like, ugh. Throw up a stronghold. His name was Brad. I realized that I was hearing him one way, but I had a theology or a mindset of doing it out here another way. That was had to be different than this. Because just the way I grew up. Y'all ever just grow up, you just think that that's right. I get with God in an intimate place and I have all these wonderful times with him, but when I get out here, I've got to put on something else. Right? And I remember this. I remember if I'd come out and I'd put on something else, it's almost like I would shut down. And then I'd have to be something that was kind of hard. It wasn't me. It wasn't really Brad that loved God. Because if I really loved God, I would love them just like I loved him. Think about how much work God has to do. And he took his time to make himself like sinful flesh manifest on the earth and then spend time with us. And those that would hear that intimacy, it would like catch fire in them because they would want to be like that because something in their heart would spur. They were living in a realm that was hard and you couldn't really hear God. There was a famine in the land for the hearing of the word of the Lord. Now, was there a lot of priests? There was religious things going on. Oh, yeah. But man, when the real God showed up, it was completely different than what was actually being portrayed. And it revolutionized how you even walked with the Lord. People followed the man in droves. It didn't matter what he did. You just want to be around this guy that loved you. We found him. It's the Messiah. Well, how you know? He's loving. I'm telling you, he's different. This is a high priest that's different. He doesn't put burdens on you. He takes them off. When they started hearing that sound, people started coming out of darkness. And here, natures were changing. The human spirit was being transformed into a supernatural spirit called love. But the enemy's trying to, speak so loudly so that we can't hear the still small voice. There's so much to do. But if we ever could do what the still small voice would do and say to do, if you just did one thing, it'd be a domino effect and he'd clean house of everything you needed to do. If you just did one thing of what the still small voice told you to do. He just, everything would start being taken care of. That's the way God is. God said one thing to start this whole thing that we're living in. He said, let there be light. Now, a lot of us would think he would go, let, you know. No, it was a still small voice. He don't have to raise his voice so everybody can hear, so darkness can hear him. Let there be light. Boom. And that one statement created everything in this world so that we could see. And there's light still standing because of one little statement. Thousands of years because of one little bitty statement. What could that do in your life if you started hearing the still small voice again? Elijah knew about it. He was in a cave. And the Lord asked him to come out, and when he came out to the edge of the cave, there was thunder, and there was a tornado, and there was an earthquake, and there was fire. And he knew God went in it. In other words, he didn't listen to the noise. He didn't listen to all that stuff. He just bent down and listened to the still small voice. See, when there's a loud clanging and stuff going on in your life, that's really God wanting to, he's about to speak to you. But if you listen and pay attention to the loud stuff, you'll miss the still small voice that could actually get you out of the cave. It gets you out of trouble. It puts you back in purpose. I mean, for goodness sake, even the enemy's got us to a place where we're waiting on some type of event to happen in our lives so that we can just get into our destiny. The only event we're going to ever have is just listen to the Lord. And if you ever listen to the Lord, everybody hold your ear like this. Why do you have ears? This ear was originally made to not hear man and not even hear the voices of nature, even though it's made for that. But the original creation and design for this ear was so that man could actually hear God. That's it. And they walked the earth and listened to him because that was the only voice that they knew. Oh, man. And then another voice, the enemy thought, oh my gosh, we got to get them distracted. If we got to get them listening to another voice. So let's go try to distract them to get them to listen to us. So he comes in the garden, right? And it wasn't just about eating fruit and eating the knowledge of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It was about just getting them to turn their ears to another voice. If they could get them turned to another voice, they would be eating things that they'd never eaten before, and God said not to do. Because every time you turn to listen to the world voice, you become that world, and you will eat things that you told God you'd never eat. It's true. How many of you guys been around a bunch of chatters? Gossipers? Oh, come on. And you walk in and your spirit's clean, and then when you get around it, you got the peer pressure of the enemy makes you stay with them. And then all of a sudden you're listening to that chatter, and when you come out of the chatter, even though you've tried not to agree with them, but you were in that realm of those voices, you had to listen, and when you come out, man, you feel like you are just hard and slimed. I have learned in my life, I get around chatter, I'll go, hey, let's go talk to them. Who? The people you're talking about. I don't do it just for that. I don't do it just for them to shut up. I do it to protect my temple. If you're going to talk, I don't know about you, but if you're going to talk about me, let's go talk. Let's go get them. But boy, the enemy's got us distracted to listen to the world. All right, I'll put scripture to it. Is that okay? I've said a few of them, but let's just turn to Amos real quick. We're going to do it real fast, and we'll go home and eat. That was my introduction. We'll have an offering after this. No, I'm kidding. The Lord has spoken to me in the last few weeks, and it is totally, I don't know about you, but God just messes me up. I always want to go with what everybody else is saying, but I realize God don't do that. Go with the flow. It's like the flow of man is like this, and he's this way. He goes upstream, and everybody's just go with the flow, man. And in these days, everybody is saying God's saying this, God's saying that, and God, it's like, man, God bipolar. Because I'm serious, you got everybody, people are running over here and people are running. Come on, let's get real. We got people going over here to, oh Lord, don't get me started. But you know what I'm saying. We're living in this days where he says, don't even go where they're saying I am. Some will say I'm out in the desert, some will say I'm over here. We've got so much of a voice that says it's Christ that it's got us scattered because we're listening to voices instead of the voice. And what has happened is it has created a famine of the hearing of the word of the Lord. For ourselves. Come on. For ourselves. How many of you guys really feel like you've been in a famine where you really can't hear the Lord for yourself? I mean, you can turn on the TV, you can go on to Google, and you can do all that, and you can hear parts of God. But I'm talking about when you're with Him and He speaks to you. When He speaks to you, man, you explode. And nobody can tell you any different. No, that ain't the Lord. Well, I'm telling you, I saw Gabriel. He came to me. No, you didn't. Okay. And it says in Amos 11 through 12, it says, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord God, that I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. Hearing the word, he's not saying that I'm not going to talk. He's talking about there's going to be a famine of people hearing me. Their ears are going to be turned to different things. And there's going to be a famine of really hearing the real God. That's where we're coming into. We're there. We're there. But it's the greatest time that we've ever lived in. Because when this stuff starts to happen, I start getting excited. I know God is about to raise up some folks like Samuel. It says, they shall wander from sea to sea. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar? They shall wander from sea to sea and from north to east, and they shall run to and fro, seeking the word of the Lord, but shall not. It's because they're being scattered instead of being just sit still. And Enemies pushing them. Don't tell me emails, what's the Lord saying for this country? What's the Lord saying? And I go, and I've had to email them, and it's not being harsh. I have to email them, what's the Lord saying to you for your country? Well, so-and-so prophesied this, and so-and-so prophesied that. Okay, what did the Lord say to you? And they go, well, I did hear this, but it has nothing to do with the way they prophesied, and I think I'm off. I go, you might be on. Give me what the Lord said. The encouraging part about what we're in is that famine, I don't know about y'all ever been po? I've been po a few times. I know what it's like. Man, when you pour, I remember buying groceries that had been in the dumpster. Desperate for food. Because when you're poor, you don't care. You got to have some food, not just for you, but for your children. And when there's no bread around, there's no life. I have felt the same thing in the Spirit. When I have been poor and not being able to hear, the Lord shake me and say, you've been eating the wrong bread. It only leaves you dry. That's not bread at all. Sit with me, and I will feed you true bread, bread of life. But I was so poor in that area of the Spirit, I was running to and fro, trying to find a word, trying to find bread somewhere. And it was making me feel good. Oh, come on. It's making me feel good, but that goes away. And then when I go home, it's like, I need some more Wonder Bread. So I go out and try to find some more Wonders and all kinds of stuff, get my adrenaline going. And when the Lord said, stop. I see your heart, but stop. It's killing you. You're creating your own famine. What do you want me to do? Sit down. I sat down for about a year. And God said one thing to me every morning, Brad. Every single morning. You know what he said? I love you, and I want to love somebody today. For a whole year, every morning. But every time he would say it, my spirit would revive to another level. Every morning, every time I heard it, I'd wake up every morning. What do you want? I want to hear you. I could care less what he said. I want to hear the voice. Every morning. And it's the strangest thing. Every morning when I'd hear it and I would go out, I would be aware of God as I went out. It was weird. It was subconscious, but I would be aware of what he's doing. And as this thing went on daily, there was breakthrough and breakthrough every single day. And by the time I was at the end of the year, I had total breakthrough not only in my spiritual life, but I had breakthrough in my physical life, my finances, and everything. And at the end of the year, I go, how in the world did this happen? He goes, you were listening to me this year. Just from you telling me that every morning, that's all it takes. If you'll listen to me, you will live. If you don't, you die. And that's when he started telling me about my ears. I won't even go into that, but he gave me a whole thing of how he created ears. And that just broke me. 1 Samuel 3. Verse 1, now the boy Samuel ministered to the Lord before Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. Say that with me. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no widespread revelation. And it came to pass. Now, revelation there means, real revelation, not corny revelation. Real revelation that actually establishes kingdoms, that establishes mankind to actually walk in the integrity of the Lord, to really bring order in the earth, not to bring chaos. Are you with me? So there was no widespread revelation, and it came to pass at that time while Eli was lying down in his place, and when his eyes had begun to grow dim, that he could not see, and before the lamp of God went out in the tabernacle of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and while Samuel was lying down, that the Lord, what? He called. What a day. He called to Samuel, and he answered, here I am. And so he ran to Eli and said, here I am, for you have called. And of course, everybody knows this story. He keeps going back and forth thinking it's, Eli. And then Eli finally figures out that it was the Lord. You can tell that Eli has kind of lost his sensitivity, or he would have known that it was the Lord when Samuel first came in there. He said, hey, did you call me? If he was really sensitive, he would have said, man, that's the Lord. You need to go back in, ask him to come in. Just answer him, here I am. But Eli has been desensitized by allowing the priesthood to go dormant and hard. It's gotten carnal. So when you get carnal, your mind is seared, your consciousness is seared, and it grows hard, and it makes you just kind of want to lay down and just wait for God to do something. And you get desensitized the way God moves. But God wants to get that off of us, of what the world has put on us. He wants to get us back to where He can wipe off that hardness, open our ears so that we can hear Him, and we can stand like Samuel in these days and be able to speak the word of the Lord when it's not even supposed to be heard. Right in the face of the enemy. And the enemy go, what in the world? God is speaking again. And we've done everything that we can. And He's raising up people that will actually listen to Him. Let's get louder. And the strange part about that is you'll watch in history in the next few years, it will get louder and louder and louder, the waves of turmoil, and everything will start getting louder. It's because that will be one of the signs that God is actually raising up people to listen. And you'll see real generals be able to stand up in the midst of turmoil and hear the voice of God, that still small voice. And those generals are you. It's not this stage, it's not me, it's the ordinary man and woman that's out in the field. It's you. The reason we're having so much trouble in our life is because we're listening to trouble instead of listening to the Lord. You listen to trouble, trouble will be attracted. Y'all ever been in a bad mood? And then it's like the whole day just goes to pot. You don't realize you created the rest of it. Because you gave into that spirit that spoke to you, and then you just emanate it, and so you just create chaos. And the enemy's over there laughing. But if we listen to who? The Lord's voice, we will walk and bring chaos into order. You won't even worry about trying to get wealth or asking God for a miracle on wealth. You'll create it. You won't be a slave. You'll be a son and a daughter. You won't be walking for Him. You'll walk with Him, talking with Him. Man, the enemy doesn't want us to hear God. He wants us to keep doing the same things we're doing each day and just live. And just be like, driftwood. Just flow down the river and just drift. Oh, don't get me started. I hardly ever hear the word of Jesus anymore. It's hard to even hear the name of Jesus anymore. I love coming to this church because I hear him talking about Jesus. I come into the intercessions, they're talking about Jesus, and I'm thinking, whoo, man, finally I get to hear Jesus. Because a lot of these places that I've gone before, you got an angel here and breakthrough there. I heard somebody say they saw a scissors angel. I mean, what in the world? Where have we gone? Where have we gone? Where is Jesus? Where is my king? Where's my friend? Where's your friend? I don't want an angel. I don't want breakthrough, because if God ain't breakthrough, I'm going to stay right here with him. And when he wants to break through, I'll walk in with him. But who cares about my breakthrough if I got God? If he wants to go down into a dungeon, I'll go down in the dungeon. If he wants to go to the heights and the penthouses, I'll go up there with him. But it doesn't matter where I go as long as I'm with my friend. Good things don't mean it's good. The good thing is when you got Jesus and you got the manifest presence in your life and you're hearing the word of the Lord, you could be in jail and you go, I love it here. I love it here. Well, they just paid your bail. I'm not going out. Well, somebody paid your bail. God's in here. I ain't going out. Tell them to keep their money. I'm like Moses. Lord, if your presence doesn't go with me, we're not going in. I'm not going to go in. And he's talking about the promised land. The enemy says, no, it's your promise. It's right here. Keep going. You got the authority of God right now. Just use it right now. And then you just step out and you leave the presence and then you gain all these promises, but you have no God. Oh, wouldn't you love to have God? I mean, I don't know about you, but he's more important than anything of destiny of my life. His voice is so important to me. If I don't hear his voice, I think I'd go insane now because I've gone too far. I have gone too far to turn back to live that old life. I've been poor. I've been betrayed. I've been left for dead in ministry. But I had the Lord, and I was happy. I was happy. He never left me. I've had cancer several times, but I had the Lord. And when I can tell you, when I had the Lord that last time, I was happy while he's cutting me up. My back looks like I've been whipped. He cut me up, and I was so calm because I knew the Lord was with me. I didn't care if I had stripes. I didn't care if I had cancer. If God was with me, he was going to be there, and he was going to take care of it all. And the doctor says, well, I think we need to take out your lymph nodes. And while I've got scars all over my back and I'm bleeding all and blood sputting, and I'm watching it, and I ask the Lord in my spirit, I go, do I need to take out my lymph nodes? Nope, don't let him take out your lymph nodes. Just when he sews you up, just ask the doctor to come in and pray for you, and then you'll get healed for the rest of your lymph nodes. I was like, okay. And I said, well, no, I'm not going to let you take out my lymph nodes. Well, I'm telling you, it looks like you may have it all in your lymph nodes from opening you up here. Well, that's good. Just go ahead and sew me up. Sews me up, walks out, comes back in. I'm shaking like this because there's so much trauma that's hit my body. I didn't have enough insurance to take care of it, so he just did in his office. I mean, it looked like something out of Batman, just take me out and creating something, He says, what else can I do for you? I said, you can pray for me that God will heal the rest of me. He didn't know God was shot or crucified. And he went, Dear Lord Jesus, we ask that you heal Mr. McClendon. And I felt a flush. Just the presence of God just came all over. Calmness came over me. My body stood still. And I knew it was done. A week later, I didn't tell all my friends. Me and a bunch of guys were out at Reading, and we came off the stage out there, and Bob was walking behind me, and as I'm walking in, and he's walking behind me, he goes, "Oh," he said, "you got healed, didn't you?" I didn't even tell him. He touched all the places that they'd cut me open. He goes, "You got healed, didn't you?" And he just touched me, and the power of God hit me, and I just went face flat, just flat. Why did I get healed? Because I listened. I know you can get healed in other places, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm trying to get us back to getting our ears tuned in. Psalms 81 says this, verse 8, Hear, O my people, and I will admonish you. That'd be good. How'd you like for God to come down and just admonish you because you're hearing? That's like the Mount of Transfiguration. He comes down to his son to admonish him in front of people because he's just listening to him. And he turns him white as snow. His face shines like the sun. And there's a cloud that covers over his head and speaks, "This is my son. Listen to him. This is one that listens." And he admonishes him in front of everyone. Just because he hears. He's chosen to listen to the real voice. And back in those days, they had the same problem as we're having now. Many were saying that they were from the Lord. Many were saying that they were Christ. That doesn't mean that people were saying that they're Jesus. They were saying they were from God. But man, here comes a hearing one. Man, when you have to say who you are, something's wrong. Oh, Israel. And I'll say, oh, United States. Oh, church, if you will listen to me. There shall be no foreign god among you, nor shall you worship any foreign god. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I'll fill it. How many of you hungry? Look at that. If you just listen, the foreign gods go out. He delivers you. If you just start listening to the voice is not just a voice that's just a sound. It's a person. When you hear the person himself is imparted, and he starts to take over. And when he starts to take over, no foreign god even can be in your temple anymore. It flushes it out. You'll want it out. I see that sucker. And then after you get flushed out, he feeds you. Just open your mouth. I'll fill it. And then it says, but my people would not heed my voice, and Israel would not have none of me. So I gave them over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsels. And that's the trick of the enemy right now. That's where we are. It's like everybody's doing what's right in their own heart, and they say that's true. And if I can do what's right in my own heart, then that you can't move me. That's the same days as in the days of Noah. Everybody was doing what was right in their own heart. They were doing all what they were imagining because that's just who they were. And the whole earth got demonized. I don't know about you, but I don't want that to happen. I'd like to see an ark of people raise up that would rise up like the ark itself above all the demonic activity and save the family of God. I'd love to see that. Because that's what happened. Through one person listening to a voice that was totally different than everything that was going on. Because when Noah was around, it was demonic. And this one man listened and did what God, and he wasn't going with the river. He wasn't going with the flow of the world. He was going opposite, and he builds an ark on ground. And nobody listened to him but except his family. I'm sure his family was probably thinking, you crazy, but we're going to do it. And they rise up when the flood comes, and they end up procreating again, and man is actually saved because someone listened to a voice. That sounds like a man named Jesus to me. Wasn't he the ark that rose above all the demonic activity and reached down and saved tons of people that were being flooded by the enemy? A standard was raised up when the enemy came in like a flood, and he started reaching in there, grabbing us, because he was listening to the voice. That's a pretty cool God. I don't know about you. Verse 13 says, oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. I would soon, say soon, I would soon subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their adversaries. You mean to tell me that all I got to do is listen to you tell me I love you? If I could just hear your voice, you mean you would actually destroy enemies if I just listen? If I could just hear you again, this stuff would start happening? Yeah, you'd be like Gideon. I'd wipe out thousands if you just heard me. How many of you had so many adversaries? You got so many problems? Enemy's on your tail. And he's got you in a tailspin trying to get answers from other voices. You go to Barnes & Noble, try to get a self-help, or you try to go to this and try to get that, and you buy this and you buy that, and you're still in that tailspin. And the enemy's got you in a tailspin through you think information's going to change you instead of a person. And so he's got you in this tailspin, and the only thing you got to do is just sit still while the tailspin just goes around. You sit still and say, Lord, you gave me ears. I don't care what you say. You could say banana. I just need to hear you. If I hear you, the tailspin leaves. My adversaries get subdued. I'm going to stop right there. I encourage you to read Isaiah 55, verse 2 and 4, because that's a huge one there. I'm going to stop right there. Let me prove this. I travel all over, and I can't stand traveling. And that's a stronghold. I'll start twitching. I was at a camp, a youth camp. This was years ago. and they wanted me to train on hearing the voice of God. And I even wrote a book years ago on the prophetic ministry, and then we sold out of it, and I didn't even put it back up. And I've got all this stuff on the voice of God, you know. And the Lord wouldn't let me take my notes up there, and so I just went up there and said, hey, everybody can hear the Lord. Here's the way the Lord speaks. Look up at Galatians 5. Everybody open their Bible. I said, these are the different natures, you know, how God speaks, and you'll know it because it has this fruit on it. And I just taught a little bit. And there was a young man there that was mean as a junkyard dog. Anybody know what a junkyard dog is? Oh, man, you get in a junkyard with that kind of dog, he'll tear you up because they're trained to kill you. And so I taught everybody just a little bit. And they were a little bit gun shy, right? You know, gun shy. And I said, tell you what we're going to do is I'm just going to pray, and I just want you to see if the Lord speaks to you. Now, I can guarantee you it's going to be different than the way your carnal mind says how God speaks. So when God shares something with you, it's going to be a little bit weird. It's going to be a little bit different than the way you expected, because God's ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. So he may give you a thought that's completely higher than what you're getting. So it's going to be a little bit weird. So when you get weird, speak it out. So I pray, and of course it was, you know, silent for a good while. And there's this young man back in the back corner, and he was just miserable. Matter of fact, found out later he's demonized. He'd been dropped many times by different homes, no mom and dad, you know, just been through abuse. Somebody forced him to be there. He's kind of leaning back in his chair. And the bad part about my gifting is I can hear thoughts. And I could hear what he was thinking. And it was just so, I could hear the voices of demons talking to him in his mind. I had such compassion on this boy. And I was thinking, Lord, if you could just speak. He'd leave. And this little old, shy little old girl, she raised her hand like, I said, oh, you got something? Yeah, I think so. But I think it's that weird thing. Is that okay? What is that? And she stood up. She goes, I heard him say banana. As soon as she said banana, the boy starts screaming in the back. And you hear all these demons come out of him. I'm going to dissect this for a moment. After he screamed, he ran up, and I grab him and I hug him because I know something's going on. I know it's God. I don't know what's going on, but I know something's going on. I know the demons left and something's going on. And I held him. I just held him. And he's weeping. The little girl's like this, you know, like, I said, what's up? He said, sir, you don't understand. I said, I probably don't, but please tell us. I've been really mean. I said, I know, it's all right, but you're not mean now. Just tell us what's going on. I was back there, and in anger, I just said, God, if you're real, you'll say banana to me. And so God, when he spoke, I felt something leave me. He heard God for himself. And then he got free. He like Psalms talks about, he vanquished his enemies. Even though he was mean, he still, well, if it's God, I'll hear him say banana. And he heard him. And when he heard him, everything went clean. It wrecked the whole camp. Well, I didn't even know what to do. And then kids started crying that had trouble, and because they knew how demonized he was, and it's like a domino effect. Kids just started crying and weeping, getting on the floor and kneeling and yelling at God, saying, "I'm sorry for this. I'm sorry." And for that one banana thing, created a smorgasbord of deliverance, and all these kids got delivered. But see, that's the thing. The enemy always thinks that always makes you think that God's got to speak to you, in a smart voice. It's got to be dovetailed. No, it's just the voice. He could say poo and you would get free. Do you get what I'm saying? Do you hear the Lord? Can you feel him in here? I mean, I can just feel Papa's hand just like, I made your ears for me. And if you could just come to me, if you just let me talk to you, everything else will work out. Seek first the kingdom, and everything else will be added. How deaf have you become? How deaf have you let the world make you hard? Have you been tricked by the enemy? Are you listening to everything else but the Lord? Is the voice that you're actually listening to really transforming you to want to adore God? This morning the Lord spoke this to me in my spirit. I had something else to speak. I was getting up and the Lord just instantly just spoke to me. And I don't know about you, but when God speaks to me, it turns my spirit. I just want to, I'm sorry, I'm in my jammies. And I just stood there in my own room, just I'm still like a kid. I don't care. I sat there and just yelled. Because he's so precious, there's nothing like it. There is nothing like it. It changes me, and I could feel it. It makes me cry. This big old burly redneck, you find me in my jammies, worshiping God in the hotel by myself. And I didn't even want to come to church. Can I just stay here with you? No, I want you to go impart this to them. Give them an invitation. Because I want everybody to come in, good and bad. I want everybody in. Anybody that'll listen to me. I don't care if you're good. I don't care if you're bad. I've got my arms open. I've got a wedding feast that I want to feed you at. And if you just come in, I'll talk to you. I'll open your ears, and you'll feast with me. I don't care how bad you are. I get the good and the bads. If you ever start catching it, you're ruined. Even the Lord said, I can do nothing of myself. He had to listen to his Father, see what his Father's doing. How many of you guys have done a lot of stuff but nothing? If your ears have been clogged and you know it, I'm talking really know it, where you know you've been deaf. You know that the enemy's tricked you. You know that he's gotten your sometimes you even feel like your forehead, your front lobe is even hard inside. If you feel like you're there and you want your ears open, I want you to stand up with me. Just stand up with me. If you're tired of listening to the same old thing that's not transforming you, it's making you harder. If you're a bad person in here, I welcome you even more. I love you. I think God's even got a greater even destiny for you. Those that are bad, really bad, of course we're all bad, but you know what I'm saying, those that have really been in the ditch. Those that have really been in the ditch, he's going to make you like Dumbo. He's going to give you huge ears. And you're going to be a spectacle to the world. Lord, I pray, we pray. Let's pray. God's in this place. Not because I'm saying it. A lot of folks in here, you can feel him. There's a sovereignty in here. There's a love in here. Papa, tug on our ears. Break all the concrete that the enemy's filled our ears with. Crack it. Split it open. Allow all the pebbles of that hardness to come out. Open up the canals of our spirit. Every person in here, every person watching. Papa, let them hear. Let them be hearers. Lord, when you said, he that has ears, let him hear. Lord, that was an invitation. So every person individually, just tell him, I want to hear. I want to hear you. We want to hear you. This church wants to hear you. This church, I know, wants to hear you. Your voice is like rain. It waters dormant seed in us and it raises it up. It causes us to grow. I break the back of a mocking spirit off those people that are in here that's trying to mock God in your head. Even those watching, there's been a spirit assigned to you that's so loud that's trying to mock you right out of this opportunity. And I pray that God's sword would swing right now and break this spirit off of you. Actually, you're the ones that hearing the mockings, you're called to be a prophet. You're called to hear the word of the Lord like Samuel. You're getting so bombarded. The measurement of bombardment of the voices, it tells you the measurement of authority that God has placed in your life to hear his voice. Come out. Come out from among that place. those that are sick. And the enemy's got you so focused on sickness. Put it aside on a shelf for a minute and just ask him to speak to you. Ask him to speak to you. Sickness has to leave. Mental illness has to leave. Your enemies are subdued. They have to kneel before God. Oh, Jesus, thank you. Thank you. Ankles are getting healed. I'm telling you, there's spirit in here. It's 12:13. You want me to stop? Is it okay? If you feel God touching you, let's do it this way. If you feel God touching you, I want you to come up to the front. If you feel God just touching you, I want you to just come up to the front. I want you to just acknowledge God. If you feel him just touching you, feel his presence on you right now. You literally feel him on you. But you know something's going on. I just want you to come up. Not because it's just an altar call. I just want you to just come up and acknowledge God. Some of you got a burning in your side. That's God. He's touching you. You've been betrayed. You've been wounded. And he's healing you where you've been blindsided by the enemy, right in your side. It's like a sword has been set in your side.